So, as Julia may have already explained, Cradle is available with different user interface languages, including Russian. So I hope that makes the tool a little easier for you to use. However, it means that it is impossible for me to use because I don't understand this. So I will instead use this one, which I can't understand, although I apologize. It is perhaps now more difficult for you. So this is the Cradle user interface, and on the left-hand side we have different sidebars, including the phase hierarchy that I was just talking about. And in the main part of the interface is this start page, and this is user definable. So it can contain whatever you want it to contain. It can be customized by each user, or it can be customized by each project, or it can be customized for different types of users to provide easy to use shortcuts for tasks that people might want to perform very often. On the left hand side, I will select this particular sidebar, which shows the content of the database. So this is a list of all of the types of items that can exist in this particular Cradle database. So this is a user-defined list, and UR here is my abbreviation for user requirement, and as you can see, I don't have any user requirements in this particular database, and what I normally do at this point is to load some user requirements from an external document, from an external Word document. So I have just started a tool called Document Loader, and I will open a Word document inside it. Document Loader searches the Word document to find all of the paragraph styles used inside it, and I will tell Document Loader to capture user requirement items by default, and click OK. And now I parse the entire Word document into Document Loader. And now as after the document has been parsed, you can see that we have identified a hierarchical structure, and I can move around that hierarchical structure to decide which parts of the document I want to load. And I'm going to load these 3 parts of the document into Cradle, and when I start the process I see a warning that tells me that there are some tables that I have not specified. So I'm going to look at each of these tables. Here is the first one. I can capture that table either into a rich text object or an image or an embedded Word object, or I can capture information from inside the table, and that's what I'm going to do. And I can capture information into the database to create one item in the database for each row in the table, or for each cell in the table, or create just one item in the database from the entire table. I'm going to create one item in the database from each row, and I define a little mapping between the columns, number, title, revision, date, number, title, revision, date, and the attributes of items that will be created in the database. And once I have defined this mapping, I will move to the next table, which has the same structure, so I can reuse the mapping that I've already created. And that will do. I will not map the other 2 tables, I will just continue, and I'm going to load that document into the Cradle database. So now something happens with the Cradle database. We take a copy of the Word document and we store that copy inside the Cradle database. We then parse the document to find the individual paragraphs and tables that we want to load, and we load those into the database to create a hierarchical structure which looks like this. So there is each of these is an item in the database of type user requirement, and each of them is linked to its origin in the original document. So this requirement is linked to the first row in the table, and this requirement is linked to that section 1.3. Of course, we might want to look at the requirements individually, and so there is one of the requirements that I have loaded, or we might want to look at the requirements all together so that we see a sort of document. And here is a view which shows all of the requirements that I have loaded from that document, including the figures that I've also loaded. Now, sometimes it's important to be able to prove what parts of a document have been loaded into Cradle. So I have an example here where I can generate a very simple view of the original document, which shows me here is the original document, and I can see which parts of that document have been loaded into Cradle and which parts have not been loaded into Cradle. So this text is highlighted because it has been loaded into the Cradle database, and all this has been loaded into the Cradle database. But this table has not been loaded. This text has been loaded, this table has not been loaded, and neither has that text. So that's a very simple way to show the author of a document which parts of their document you have loaded into Cradle. We can go a stage further, and we can show which parts of the document we have loaded, and also we could show where that information now lives in the Cradle database. So I can see this is all of the text that I have loaded into Cradle, and I can see that this piece of text, section 1.3, has been loaded into Cradle as the item UR5. And I can see that this part of the text has been loaded into the item UR3. And I can see that this row in the table has been loaded into the item in Cradle UR8. So this is another simple view that we can use with the author of the document to show which parts of that document have been loaded and where that information has been stored in the Cradle database. Now I'm just going to change one of the requirements that we have loaded from the document. And this is bad engineering. I would not normally do this, but I want to do it for my demonstration. Change tracking. Put in a reason for the change. And now I've done that, I can look at the third style of document coverage. And we do a lot of work with the nuclear industry. And this is a very important step for the nuclear and the rail industry, where safety is a great concern, of course. In this view, I have looked at this. I display the same document. I show with highlighting which parts of the document have been captured into the database and which parts have not been captured. For each part of the document that has been captured, I show where it has been captured into the database. And then what I also do is I compare the text that was originally. If you receive a document from an external group, this is a way that you can show first which parts of the document you have loaded, second, where the information has been stored in the database, and third, that you have not changed the information from the external group in any way. And in some of the areas where we work, those are three very important things to be able to show. Now, of course, if this was a real project, these requirements would be linked to other information in the database. And potentially, if this was a real project, the external information would change. That external document might change. And so let me show you what happens if that external information changes. So I open Document Loader, and I ask Document Loader to examine a new version of a document that I have already loaded. And here is that new version. And now Document Loader compares the Word document I've just indicated with the previous version of that Word document in the database. And the results of that comparison are shown here, where all of the differences have been found, and the differences are marked in yellow. So we can look at the first difference, which is that a new section 1.4 has been added to the database. Document Loader has added the red color, the underline, and the change bar. The second change is in the first row of this table. The third change, 2 new rows have been added into that table, and the fourth change is that the word 1 has become the word 0. Now I can decide whether I want to accept this new version of the document into the database. Perhaps I don't want to accept it because the changes are too large. Perhaps I need to talk to the customer about them. But for my demo, of course, I will load the new version of that document into the database, like so. Cradle takes a copy of that new Word document. It stores all of the changes in the database and updates all of the information inside Cradle, so that now if I browse, close that. So now if I browse the database, I can see that I have this new item 1.4, which is linked to the new section in the version 2 of the source document. And I can also see that this item, which is linked to the modified first row in the table, if I look at this item's change history, I can see that the item has been changed because of the changes in the document. And if this was a real database, then because this item has changed, other information in the database might now need to change. So now I have loaded the new version of the source document into Cradle, I can see the full impact of the changes. And perhaps that impact is very large. Perhaps it is so large that I cannot accept the new version of my source document. Perhaps it's so that the impact of this source document, this new version of the source document, is so large that we cannot accept it into the database. If that is true, then you can delete this new version of the source document. You can select it and delete it, and if you do that, then Cradle will delete the version 2 source document. It will undo all of the changes to the items that are affected by that version of the source document, and it will return the database to its state when we only had the version 1 source document. So in that sense, you can load new versions of source documents into Cradle as an experiment to see what the impact may be, and then once you know what the impact may be, you can continue or revert back to a previous source document version if you wish. Now at the moment, that's all I would like to say about source documents.